The night was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that felt heavy and unnatural. Ethan Carter had always been skeptical about aliens, UFOs, or anything remotely extraterrestrial. He often joked with his friends about how humans were probably the most boring species in the universe. But on this particular evening, as he walked home from work through the dense woods near his small town, everything changed. Ethan noticed a faint hum in the air, almost like electricity crackling but softer, more melodic. At first, he thought it might be his imagination playing tricks on him after a long day at the office. But then, out of nowhere, a blinding light engulfed him. It wasn't harsh. It was warm, golden, and strangely inviting. Before he could react, Ethan felt himself lifted off the ground, weightless, as if gravity itself had abandoned him. When the light faded, Ethan found himself inside what could only be described as a spacecraft. The walls shimmered with colors that seemed alive, shifting between hues of blue, green, and silver. There were no sharp edges. Everything curved seamlessly into one another, giving the impression of organic design rather than mechanical construction. His heart raced as panic set in. Was this real? Had he finally lost his mind? Before Ethan could process anything further, a figure emerged from the shadows. She was tall, slender, and undeniably alien. Her skin glowed faintly, translucent like moonlight filtering through water. Her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and iridescent, seemed to pierce right through him. Yet there was something oddly human about her expression. Fear. She froze when she saw him, her delicate hands hovering over a device strapped to her wrist. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, in a voice that resonated like wind chimes, she spoke words Ethan couldn't understand. They sounded musical yet urgent, layered with emotion. When he didn't respond, her gaze darted around the room as though searching for an escape route. Ethan raised his hand slowly, trying to appear non-threatening. I don't know what's going on," he stammered, his voice trembling. "But I'm not here to hurt you." The alien woman flinched at the sound of his voice. Her glowing skin dimmed slightly, and her posture shifted from defensive to outright alarmed. She tapped furiously on the device on her wrist, which emitted soft peeps and flashes of light. Whatever she was doing, it clearly wasn't working. Frustration flickered across her face, followed by something deeper, dread. Finally, she pointed at Ethan, her movements jerky and hesitant. She said something else in her melodic language, but this time her tone carried a question. Ethan shook his head. "I don't understand," he repeated, gesturing helplessly. That's when she did something unexpected. She stepped closer, her luminous eyes scanning every inch of him. Her fear seemed to grow with each passing second until, finally, she whispered a single word in broken English. "Human." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "Yes," he replied cautiously. "I'm human." At that moment, the alien woman recoiled as though struck. Her entire body tensed, and her glowing skin turned a pale shade of gray. She backed away quickly, muttering under her breath in her native tongue. Whatever she had expected to find, whatever mission she'd been on, it was clear now that encountering a human being was not part of the plan, and it terrified her. As Ethan stood there, confused and overwhelmed, one thing became painfully obvious. This wasn't just any ordinary abduction. Something about him, about humanity, had shaken this otherworldly creature to her core. And as the ship hummed softly around them, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to uncover secrets far bigger than himself or Earth itself. Little did he know, this was only the beginning. The alien woman's reaction left Ethan baffled. Her fear wasn't the kind of controlled panic someone might feel when encountering an unknown creature. It was raw, visceral, and deeply unsettling. She kept her distance, her glowing skin now flickering erratically like a faulty light bulb. Her large, shimmering eyes darted between him and the device on her wrist, which continued to emit soft peeps that grew louder with each passing second. Ethan took a cautious step forward, his hand still raised in surrender. "Hey," he said softly, trying to sound as non-threatening as possible. "I'm not here to hurt you. I don't even know how I got here." The alien flinched again, backing further away until she hit one of the curved walls. She pressed herself against it, her body trembling visibly. Her lips moved rapidly, forming words in her melodic language that Ethan couldn't understand. But there was no mistaking the emotion behind them. She was pleading, almost begging, though for what he had no idea. Then, without warning, the ship shuddered violently. A low hum filled the air, growing louder by the second. Lights along the walls pulsed in sync with the vibrations, casting eerie shadows across the room. Ethan stumbled, grabbing onto a nearby console for support. The alien woman reacted instantly, her fear momentarily overridden by urgency. She tapped furiously at the device on her wrist, muttering commands under her breath. "What's happening?" Ethan shouted over the noise, his voice tinged with panic. She ignored him, her focus entirely on the device. After a few tense seconds, the shaking subsided, leaving an uncomfortable silence in its wake. The alien let out a shaky breath, her shoulders slumping slightly. For the first time since their encounter, she seemed to relax, but only marginally. Slowly, she turned her attention back to Ethan. This time, her expression was different. Gone was the outright terror. Instead, she looked conflicted, as if wrestling with some internal dilemma. She pointed at him again, her movements deliberate but hesitant. "Human," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Ethan replied, nodding slowly. "That's me. Just human." Her eyes narrowed slightly, studying him intently. Then, after a long pause, she gestured for him to follow her. Though wary, Ethan complied. He didn't have much of a choice, not unless he wanted to stay stranded in this strange, alien ship. She led him through a narrow corridor, the walls pulsating gently as they walked. The air smelled faintly metallic, and the temperature was cooler than before. At the end of the hallway, she stopped in front of a circular doorway that slid open automatically. Inside was a small chamber filled with holographic displays and floating symbols that glowed in various colors. The alien stepped inside and motioned for Ethan to join her. Once he entered, the door closed behind them with a soft hiss. She began manipulating the holograms, her fingers moving gracefully through the air. Images appeared, one of Earth, another of what looked like a massive spaceship orbiting a distant planet, and finally, a series of diagrams depicting humanoid figures. Ethan watched in stunned silence as realization dawned on him. These weren't random images, they were explanations. Somehow, this alien was trying to communicate with him, using visuals instead of words. One image stood out among the rest. A group of humans standing side by side, their faces blurred but unmistakably human. Beneath them was a single word written in bold letters. Extinction. Ethan's stomach churned. What does that mean? He asked aloud, more to himself than to her. The alien paused, her glowing eyes meeting his. There was sadness in her gaze, a weight that made Ethan's chest tighten. Whatever message she was trying to convey, it wasn't good, and it was clear that humanity played a central role in it. Before he could ask anything else, the ship trembled again, this time accompanied by a loud alarm. The alien woman spun around, her earlier fear returning in full force. She grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him toward the exit. It was obvious they were running out of time. But from what or whom? Ethan had no idea. As they raced through the corridors, one thought echoed in Ethan's mind. Why was she so afraid of humans? And why did it feel like the fate of two species depended on finding the answer? The ship's alarms blared louder with each passing second, a piercing sound that reverberated through the corridors and made Ethan's head throb. The alien woman tugged at his arm with surprising strength, her movements frantic as she pulled him deeper into the labyrinthine vessel. Her glowing skin had dimmed to a pale, almost sickly hue, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. Whatever was happening, it terrified her. And that fear was contagious. Where are we going? Ethan shouted over the noise, struggling to keep up with her swift pace. His legs felt heavy, his body unaccustomed to the strange gravity, or lack thereof. Inside the ship, every step felt like running through water. She didn't answer, her focus entirely on navigating the twisting hallways. The walls around them pulsed erratically now, their usual soothing glow replaced by flashes of red and orange. It was as if the ship itself were panicking alongside its pilot. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from behind them. Ethan glanced over his shoulder just in time to see a section of the corridor collapse, sending sparks flying in all directions. A shadowy figure emerged from the wreckage, a hulking mechanical creature with multiple limbs and glowing eyes. Its movements were jerky but purposeful, and it emitted a low guttural hum that sent chills down Ethan's spine. "What is that thing?" Ethan yelled, his voice cracking with panic. The alien woman didn't respond. Instead, she yanked him harder, forcing him to pick up the pace. They rounded a corner and entered another corridor, this one narrower than the last. The air grew colder, and the pulsating lights flickered dangerously, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. Ethan's mind raced. Was this some kind of security system? Had they triggered an intruder alert when he was brought aboard? Or was this something else entirely? The mechanical creature followed relentlessly, its metallic limbs clanging against the walls as it pursued them. Each step it took seemed to shake the entire ship, and Ethan could feel the vibrations beneath his feet. He risked another glance back and immediately regretted it. The creature was gaining ground, its glowing eyes fixed on them with predatory intensity. "We're not going to outrun that thing," Ethan panted, his lungs burning from exertion. The alien woman skidded to a halt in front of a sealed door. She released Ethan's arm and began frantically tapping at a panel beside it. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a small, dimly lit chamber. Without hesitation, she shoved Ethan inside and followed close behind, sealing the door shut just as the creature reached them. For a moment, there was silence. The only sound was their ragged breathing as they leaned against the wall, trying to catch their breath. Ethan looked around the cramped space, taking in the sparse furnishings, a single console, a few floating holograms, and what appeared to be a cot tucked into the corner. "What was that?" Ethan demanded, his voice shaking. "And why is it after us?" The alien woman hesitated, her luminous eyes darting toward the sealed door. Then, with a deep sigh, she turned to face him. Her expression softened slightly, though traces of fear still lingered. Slowly, she raised her hand and pointed at herself, then at Ethan, and finally at the door. "You think it's after me?" Ethan asked, incredulous. "But I didn't do anything." She shook her head vigorously, her hands moving in quick, fluid gestures. Though Ethan couldn't understand her language, her meaning was clear. This wasn't about him. It was about her. About what she had done. Before Ethan could press further, the ship shuddered violently again. The console in the room lit up, displaying a series of symbols and images. One stood out prominently, a map of the surrounding area, with a blinking red dot rapidly approaching their location. "They're coming," Ethan muttered, dread settling in his stomach. The alien woman nodded grimly. She grabbed his hand and placed it on the console, her touch surprisingly warm despite her cool exterior. Then, pointing at the map, she gestured for him to follow her lead. It was clear they weren't safe here, but where could they possibly go? And more importantly, who, or what, was hunting them? As the ship groaned under the strain of whatever force pursued them, Ethan realized one thing for certain. Survival meant trusting this mysterious alien woman, no matter how terrified she seemed of him, or humanity itself. The alien woman's grip on Ethan's hand tightened as she guided his fingers across the console. Her movements were deliberate, almost instructional, as if she were teaching him how to operate the unfamiliar controls. Though Ethan had no idea what he was doing, he followed her lead, mimicking her gestures and pressing the glowing symbols she pointed to. "What are we doing?" Ethan asked, his voice strained with urgency. "Are we trying to fly this thing?" She shook her head sharply, then tapped a sequence of buttons that caused the holographic map to zoom in on their current location. A series of blinking lights appeared along the edges of the screen, marking escape routes, or so Ethan assumed. One route stood out more prominently than the others, highlighted in blue instead of red. "Is that where we're going?" Ethan asked, pointing at the blue path. The alien nodded, her expression tense but determined. She gestured toward the door, signaling for them to move quickly. But before they could act, a loud metallic thud echoed from the other side of the chamber. The mechanical creature was close, too close. Ethan's heart sank. "It's found us." The alien woman didn't waste time panicking. Instead, she grabbed a small device from her belt, a sleek, palm-sized gadget, and activated it. The air around them shimmered momentarily, and suddenly, the room seemed quieter, darker. It was as though they had been enveloped in an invisible bubble, shielding them from detection. "What did you just do?" Ethan whispered, his eyes darting toward the door. She pressed a finger to her lips, silencing him. Then, with careful precision, she manipulated the console again, initiating some kind of automated sequence. The ship groaned in response, its systems whirring to life. Lights flickered outside the chamber, and the distant sound of machinery suggested the vessel was preparing for something big. "We're leaving, aren't we?" Ethan guessed, watching her work. "But where are we going?" She paused, her glowing eyes locking onto his. For a moment, she looked conflicted, as if debating whether or not to share the truth. Finally, she pointed at the map again, specifically at a cluster of stars far beyond Earth's solar system. Then, using her hands, she mined a protective barrier around the cluster, a shield of sorts. "You're taking me somewhere safe." Ethan ventured, piecing together her gestures. She nodded hesitantly, but there was something in her expression that made him uneasy. It wasn't relief, it was resignation, as though she knew this decision came with consequences neither of them could fully comprehend. Before Ethan could question her further, the ship lurched violently, throwing them both off balance. The mechanical creature had breached the outer corridor, its heavy footsteps reverberating through the walls. Sparks flew as it tore through the sealed door, its glowing eyes locking onto them instantly. "Now," the alien woman shouted in broken English, grabbing Ethan's arm and pulling him toward a secondary exit hidden behind a panel. They slipped through just as the creature lunged, narrowly avoiding its razor-sharp limbs. On the other side, they emerged into a narrow maintenance shaft filled with exposed wires and humming conduits. The alien woman moved with practiced ease, guiding Ethan through the cramped space. Behind them, the creature smashed through the panel, its metallic body scraping against the walls as it pursued them. "This way," she urged, pointing ahead to a ladder leading upward. Without hesitation, Ethan climbed, his muscles screaming in protest as he hauled himself higher. The alien woman followed close behind, her movements graceful despite the chaos. At the top, they reached a hatch that opened into what appeared to be an escape pod bay. Several pods lined the walls, each one sleek and compact, designed for rapid deployment. The alien woman sprinted toward the nearest pod and began inputting commands into its control panel. "We're really leaving," Ethan muttered, glancing back at the hatch. The sounds of destruction grew louder. The creature was almost upon them. "Go," she ordered, shoving him inside the pod. Once he was seated, she sealed the hatch and strapped herself into the adjacent seat. With a final press of a button, the pod detached from the main ship and launched into the void of space. As they hurtled away from the damaged vessel, Ethan caught one last glimpse of the mechanical creature through the window. It stood frozen amidst the wreckage, its glowing eyes staring after them with an unsettling intensity. For now, they were safe, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was only beginning. And judging by the alien woman's somber expression, The worst was yet to come. The escape pod drifted silently through the vast expanse of space, its sleek exterior reflecting the distant light of a dying star. Inside, Ethan sat rigidly in his seat, his mind racing as he tried to process everything that had happened. The alien woman beside him remained eerily calm, her glowing skin dimmed to a faint shimmer as she monitored the pod's controls. Her hands moved deftly over the holographic interface, adjusting settings and plotting their course. Ethan finally broke the silence. "Where are we going?" His voice was steady now, though tension still lingered beneath the surface. "And why did you bring me with you? You've been scared of me since the moment you saw I'm human." She glanced at him briefly, her large eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and determination. For a long moment, she said nothing, as if weighing whether or not to trust him. Then, with a deep breath, she began speaking, not in her melodic language this time, but in halting, broken English. "Humans, dangerous," she said slowly, each word carefully chosen. "Not safe. Not for us." Ethan frowned, confusion clouding his face. "Dangerous? What do you mean? We didn't do anything to you, or your people." Her expression darkened, and she turned back to the console, pulling up a series of holographic images. One depicted Earth, vibrant and teeming with life. Another showed the same planet, but barren, desolate, covered in ash and ruins. Between the two images was a timeline, marked with symbols Ethan couldn't decipher. "You see," she asked, pointing at the second image. "This future. Your kind. Destroy. Everything." Ethan stared at the hologram, his stomach sinking. "You're saying humans will destroy Earth? That's insane. How could you possibly know that?" She hesitated, then tapped another sequence of commands. A new image appeared, a massive spaceship orbiting a distant planet. Surrounding it were smaller vessels, all bearing the same insignia, a jagged circle with 3 lines radiating outward. Ethan recognized it instantly. It was the symbol etched into the mechanical creature that had chased them. "This is my people," she explained, gesturing toward the ship. "We watch, study, learn from mistakes of others, prevent destruction." Ethan leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Wait, you're telling me your species observes other civilizations, like galactic historians or something?" She nodded slightly, though her gaze remained troubled. "Yes, but humans, different, special, dangerous. Your growth, too fast, too reckless. My people fear you spread chaos, endanger galaxy." Ethan shook his head, struggling to wrap his mind around what she was saying. "So, what? You abduct random humans to study us, to figure out how dangerous we are?" "No," she replied sharply, her voice tinged with frustration. "I came alone, against orders, to warn." "Warn?" Ethan echoed, incredulous. "Warn who? Me? Humanity? About what?" She pointed at the hologram again, specifically at the timeline leading to Earth's destruction. "This path, inevitable unless change, unless stop." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "Stop what? Stop us? Are you saying your people want to intervene? To stop humanity before we can? Endanger the galaxy?" Her silence confirmed his fears. She didn't need to say anything. The look on her face said it all. Her people weren't just observers. They were judges, ready to pass sentence on humanity before they even had a chance to prove themselves. "But that's not fair," Ethan exclaimed, his voice rising. "You can't just decide our fate based on some prediction. People aren't perfect, but we deserve a chance to." Before he could finish, the pod shuddered violently, throwing them both against their restraints. An alarm blared, and red warning lights flashed across the console. Outside the window, a fleet of ships emerged from hyperspace, surrounding them like predators closing in on prey. "They found us," the alien woman whispered, her voice barely audible over the noise. Her hands trembled as she frantically worked the controls. attempting to evade the incoming vessels. Ethan gripped the edge of his seat, his heart pounding. "Who are they? Your people?" She shook her head, her expression grim. Worse. As the enemy ships drew closer, Ethan realized one thing for certain. Whatever battle they were caught in the middle of, it wasn't just about him, or even humanity. It was about survival. And right now, neither of them had much of a fighting. The enemy ships closed in rapidly, their sleek designs bristling with weapons that glowed ominously against the blackness of space. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he stared out the window, watching helplessly as the fleet surrounded them like wolves circling prey. Each ship bore the same jagged insignia, the one etched into the mechanical creature that had hunted them earlier. "They're not your people," Ethan murmured, turning to the alien woman. "Who are they?" Her hands trembled as she worked furiously at the controls, attempting to maneuver the pod away from the encroaching vessels. "Enforcers," she replied tersely, her voice strained. "Sent to eliminate threats." "Eliminate," Ethan repeated, his stomach sinking. "You mean us?" She didn't answer directly, but her silence spoke volumes. Her glowing skin dimmed further, almost blending with the shadows inside the cracked pod. It was clear she was terrified, not just for herself, but for him as well. One of the larger ships fired a warning shot, sending a blinding beam of energy streaking past their pod. The impact shook them violently, and Ethan slammed back into his seat, his heart racing. "They're going to kill us," he shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "No," she said firmly, though her fear was evident. "Not yet. They want answers first." "What answers?" Ethan demanded, gripping the armrests tightly. "What could we possibly know that they care about?" She hesitated, her luminous eyes locking onto his. Then, with a deep sigh, she pointed at herself, then at him. "Us," she said simply. "Our connection." "Our connection," Ethan echoed, confused. "What connection? I don't even know you." Her expression softened slightly, tinged with sadness. "You represent humanity. I represent defiance. Together, we challenge their plans." Ethan's mind raced as he tried to piece together what she meant. These enforcers weren't just after them. They were after something bigger, something tied to humanity's fate. And somehow, this alien woman had put herself, and him, at the center of it all. Another blast rocked the pod, this time closer than before. Sparks flew from the console as systems began to fail. The alien woman cursed under her breath in her melodic language, her fingers moving faster across the damaged interface. "We can't outrun them," she admitted grimly. "But maybe we can hide." "Hide where?" Ethan asked, glancing around the tiny pod. There was nowhere to go, no way to escape the overwhelming force bearing down on them. She tapped a final sequence of commands, and the pod's engines roared to life. Instead of fleeing outward, however, the vessel dove sharply downward, heading straight for a nearby asteroid field. The jagged rocks loomed ahead, their surfaces pockmarked with craters and debris. It was a risky move, suicidal, even, but it was their only chance. As they entered the asteroid field, the enforcer ships followed, their movements precise and calculated. Laser fire erupted around them, narrowly missing the pod as they weaved through the chaotic maze of floating boulders. Ethan clenched his teeth, bracing himself for impact as the alien woman guided the pod with remarkable skill. "They won't stop," she muttered, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "They never do." Suddenly, the pod shuddered again, this time more violently than before. A direct hit had grazed their hull, causing smoke to fill the cabin. Alarms blared incessantly, and the lights flickered dangerously. "We're losing power," Ethan yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. The alien woman ignored him, her focus unwavering. With one final burst of speed, she steered the pod behind a massive asteroid, using its bulk as cover. For a moment, there was silence, stiffening and tense, as they waited for the enforcers to pass. When the ships finally moved on, Scanning elsewhere, Ethan let out a shaky breath. Is it over? She shook her head slowly, her expression grave. No, this is just beginning. Before Ethan could ask what she meant, the pod systems began to shut down completely. Darkness enveloped them, leaving only the faint glow of her skin to illuminate the cramped space. As the reality of their situation settled in, Ethan realized one thing for certain. Survival wasn't guaranteed, and whatever lay ahead, it would test them both in ways neither could have imagined. The pod drifted silently in the shadow of the massive asteroid, its systems dead, and its occupants plunged into darkness. Ethan sat frozen, his ears straining for any sign of the Enforcer ships. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of residual energy from the alien woman's glowing skin. Her light cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the cramped space feel even smaller. They'll find us, Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. We can't stay here forever. She didn't respond immediately, her gaze fixed on the console as if willing it to come back to life. Finally, she reached for a small device strapped to her belt, the same one she had used earlier to create that invisible shield. With careful precision, she activated it again, bathing the pod in a soft, shimmering aura. This will hide us, for now, she said quietly, her English still halting but clearer than before. But not long enough. Ethan frowned, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. So what's the plan? Sit here until they catch up, because I'm pretty sure hiding isn't going to cut it. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, she looked almost guilty. Then, with a deep breath, she turned to face him fully. There is another way. What way? Ethan demanded, leaning forward. You've been dragging me along since this whole thing started, and I still don't know what's going on. Who are those enforcers? Why are they after us? And why does it feel like you're hiding something? She hesitated, her luminous eyes searching his face. Then, slowly, she nodded. You deserve truth. All of it. Reaching out, she tapped a sequence of commands on the device in her hand. A holographic projection flickered to life, displaying a map of the surrounding region. At its center was a single point, a distant planet surrounded by rings of ice and dust. This is Sanctuary, she explained, pointing at the planet. Place where my kind go when hunted. Safe haven. Ethan stared at the image, his mind racing. And you think we can make it there? In this broken-down pod? No, she admitted, shaking her head. Pod cannot reach. But she paused, glancing toward the rear compartment of the pod. Hidden behind a panel was a small cylindrical object, compact yet intricate, with glowing runes etched into its surface. What's that? Ethan asked, narrowing his eyes. Emergency teleportation device, she replied. One use only. Can take us close to Sanctuary, but risk is high. Risk? Ethan echoed, his stomach sinking. What kind of risk? She hesitated again, clearly reluctant to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Device unstable. Could fail. Could kill us both. Ethan let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through his hair. Great. So our options are either get caught by those enforcers or gamble our lives on some ancient sci-fi gadget. Fantastic. It's only chance, she insisted, her tone firm despite her fear. Better than waiting here to die. Ethan sighed, knowing she was right. As much as he hated the idea of trusting an untested piece of alien tech, staying put wasn't an option either. The enforcers would eventually find them. And when they did, there wouldn't be any second chances. Fine, he muttered, nodding reluctantly. Let's do it. But if this thing fries us, I'm blaming you. A flicker of amusement crossed her face. Though it quickly faded, she retrieved the teleportation device and held it carefully, her hand steady despite the gravity of the situation. Activating it caused the runes to glow brighter, pulsing in rhythm with a low hum that filled the pod. We must hold on, she instructed, extending her free hand toward him. Do not let go. Ethan hesitated for a split second before grasping her hand tightly. Her skin was cool but reassuringly solid, grounding him amidst the chaos. As the device powered up, the air around them crackled with energy, distorting the very fabric of reality. Then, without warning, the world dissolved into blinding light. When Ethan opened his eyes again, he found himself standing on unfamiliar ground. The sky above was a swirling mix of colors, purples, blues, and golds, and the air smelled sweet, like flowers blooming under rain. Before them stretched a vast landscape dotted with crystalline structures that seemed to grow organically from the earth itself. "Is this the sanctuary?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with awe. "Yes," the alien woman replied, her expression softening. "For now, we are safe." But as they took their first steps into this strange new world, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that safety was only temporary. Somewhere out there, the enforcers were still hunting them, and sooner or later, they would find a way to follow. The sanctuary was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. The crystalline structures that dotted the landscape shimmered with an inner light, casting prismatic reflections across the ground. Strange plants swayed gently in the breeze, their translucent leaves glowing faintly as if alive with energy. In the distance, towering spires rose into the swirling sky, their surfaces etched with intricate patterns that pulsed rhythmically, almost like breathing. "It's beautiful," Ethan murmured, his voice tinged with wonder. "But where is everyone? Shouldn't there be others here?" The alien woman nodded slowly, her glowing skin blending seamlessly with the ethereal surroundings. "This place, hidden. Few come, most too afraid." "Afraid of what?" Ethan asked, turning to face her. "The enforcers." She hesitated, her luminous eyes scanning the horizon. "Not just them. Something else. Something older." Before Ethan could press further, a low rumble echoed through the air. The ground beneath their feet vibrated slightly, and the pulsating patterns on the spires began to glow brighter. From the shadows of the nearest structure emerged a figure, tall, humanoid, but unmistakably alien. Its body was covered in iridescent scales that shifted colors with every movement, and its elongated limbs ended in delicate, claw-like fingers. Its eyes, large and multifaceted, locked onto them with an intensity that made Ethan's skin crawl. "You shouldn't have come here," the newcomer said in perfect English, its voice smooth yet cold. "You've brought danger." Ethan instinctively stepped closer to the alien woman, who raised her hands in a gesture of peace. "We mean no harm," she replied, her tone calm but firm. "We seek refuge. The enforcers, they hunt us." The newcomer tilted its head slightly, studying them both with unnerving scrutiny. Then, without warning, it extended one of its clawed hands toward Ethan. A faint beam of light shot out, enveloping him briefly before vanishing. Ethan staggered back, startled. "What was that?" he demanded, his heart racing. "A scan," the newcomer explained, its expression unreadable. "To confirm your intentions. You are human, yes. And you," it turned its gaze to the alien woman. "You defy your own kind to protect him. Why?" Her jaw tightened, and for a moment she looked conflicted. Finally, she spoke. "Because humans deserve a chance. Because my people are wrong to judge them without understanding." The newcomer let out a soft hiss, a sound that might have been laughter or disdain. "Your compassion will be your undoing, as it has been for many who sought this place." Before Ethan could ask what that meant, the ground trembled again, more violently this time. The spire's glow intensified, and a deep, resonant hum filled the air. The alien woman gasped, her eyes widening in alarm. "They're here," she whispered, gripping Ethan's arm tightly. "Who?" Ethan asked, panic rising in his chest. "The enforcers." "No," the newcomer interjected, its voice laced with dread. "Something worse." As if on cue, the sky above darkened, the vibrant colors replaced by an ominous shadow. From the void descended a massive shape, A ship unlike any Ethan had seen before. Its design was jagged and chaotic, as if stitched together from fragments of other vessels. Its surface writhed with tendrils of black smoke, and its presence seemed to drain the life from everything around it. The alien woman stumbled backward, her fear palpable. It can't be. What is that thing? Ethan shouted, his voice cracking with terror. The Harbinger. The newcomer replied grimly. An ancient force that consumes all in its path. It follows the enforcers. It always does. Ethan's mind raced as he tried to process the enormity of the situation. They had fled one threat only to stumble into another, far greater one. And judging by the expressions on both aliens' faces, survival wasn't guaranteed this time either. We need to move, the alien woman urged, pulling Ethan toward the nearest spire. There's a shelter beneath it. We can hide there. And then what? Ethan snapped, his frustration boiling over. Keep running forever. There has to be a way to fight back. The alien woman stopped abruptly, her glowing eyes meeting his. For the first time, he saw not just fear, but resolve. Maybe there is, she said softly. But it will require trust. Both of us. As the Harbinger loomed closer, its tendrils reaching out like grasping hands, Ethan realized one thing for certain. Whatever choice they made next would determine not just their fates, but perhaps the fate of humanity itself. The shelter beneath the spire was a stark contrast to the beauty above. It was dimly lit, with walls made of smooth metallic material that hummed faintly as if alive. The air inside felt heavier, charged with an energy that made Ethan's skin prickle. He followed the alien woman deeper into the structure, their footsteps echoing in the narrow corridors. What now? Ethan asked, his voice tight with frustration. We're trapped here while that thing tears apart the sanctuary. Is this really our grand plan? To hide and hope it goes away? She turned to face him, her glowing eyes steady despite the chaos outside. Hiding won't save us, she admitted, but running won't either. If we want to survive and protect your kind, we need to act. Act how? Ethan demanded. You said yourself the Harbinger consumes everything. What can we possibly do against something like that? Her expression softened, though determination still burned within her gaze. There is one option, a weapon buried deep in the sanctuary's archives. Ancient tech, forgotten by most, feared by all. A weapon? Ethan echoed, incredulous. You're telling me there's some magical alien gadget down here that can take out that monstrosity? It's not magic, she corrected sharply. It's science. Dangerous science. But yes, it has the power to stop the Harbinger. At least temporarily. Ethan crossed his arms, skepticism etched across his face. And why hasn't anyone used it before? Sounds like exactly what your people need to deal with threats like this. Because using it comes at a cost, she replied gravely. The weapon requires a host, a living being, to activate it. And once activated, the host doesn't survive. Silence fell between them, heavy and suffocating. Ethan stared at her, realization dawning. So let me guess, you're planning to be the host. Her silence confirmed his suspicion. She looked away briefly, her hands trembling slightly before she composed herself. I've already defied my people, risked everything for you, for humanity. This is my choice, my responsibility. No, Ethan said firmly, stepping closer. Absolutely not. I didn't come this far just to watch you sacrifice yourself. There has to be another way. There isn't, she countered, her voice rising slightly. Do you think I want this? Do you think I chose this path lightly? But if I don't do this, the Harbinger will destroy us, and then move on to Earth. Your species will never stand a chance. Ethan clenched his fists, anger and desperation warring within him. Then let me do it. Let me be the host. Her eyes widened in shock. You don't understand what you're saying. You'd die instantly. So would you. He shot back. Why should it be you? You've done nothing wrong. You've been trying to help me. To help humanity. I'm the human here. If anyone should pay the price, it's me." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the shelter seemed louder now, pressing down on them like the weight of their decision. Finally, she shook her head, her voice soft but resolute. "No, Ethan, this isn't your burden to bear. It's mine." Before he could argue further, the ground shook violently, knocking them both off balance. A low, guttural roar echoed through the shelter, reverberating in their bones. The Harbinger had found them. "We're out of time," she whispered, grabbing his hand and pulling him toward a sealed door at the end of the corridor. With a wave of her device, the door slid open, revealing a chamber filled with ancient machinery. At its center was a pedestal, atop which rested a crystalline orb pulsing with dark, ominous energy. "This is it," she said, her voice barely audible over the growing cacophony outside. "The weapon." Ethan hesitated, his mind racing. He knew what she intended to do, and he couldn't let her. As the Harbinger's shadow loomed closer, he made a split-second decision. Before she could react, he lunged forward, placing his hands on the orb. "No," she screamed, reaching for him. But it was too late. The orb flared to life, enveloping Ethan in a blinding light. Pain seared through his body. But amidst the agony, he felt something else. A surge of power, raw and overwhelming. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was her face, twisted with grief and disbelief. And then, silence. The light faded, leaving behind an eerie stillness. Ethan's body slumped to the ground, lifeless, as the alien woman knelt beside him, her glowing skin dimmed to a faint shimmer. Tears streaked down her face. Silent, luminous drops that seemed to carry the weight of galaxies. She reached out, brushing his hair gently, her hands trembling. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You weren't meant to sacrifice yourself." But even as grief consumed her, the chamber began to hum with energy. The crystalline orb pulsed once more, its dark glow now tinged with golden light. From within it emerged a wave of power so immense that it shook the very foundations of the sanctuary. Outside, the Harbinger let out a deafening roar, a sound of fury and pain, as its writhing tendrils disintegrated into nothingness. Its massive form collapsed inward, consumed by the same force it had unleashed upon countless worlds. The alien woman staggered to her feet, watching in awe as the weapon completed its purpose. It hadn't just destroyed the Harbinger. It had cleansed the surrounding area of its corrupting influence, restoring balance to the sanctuary. The spire's patterns glowed brightly again, their rhythmic pulses steady and calm. Life returned to the landscape, vibrant and renewed. As the dust settled, she turned back to Ethan, her heart heavy with loss. But then, something unexpected happened. The orb, now inert, began to crackle faintly, releasing a soft, warm light. Slowly, Ethan's chest rose. He was breathing. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Impossible. Ethan stirred, groaning softly as consciousness returned. He blinked up at her, confusion clouding his features. "What happened? Did we stop it?" She stared at him, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, she managed a shaky smile. "You did. Somehow, you survived." "But how?" Ethan asked, sitting up slowly. His body felt different, lighter, yet stronger, as if infused with residual energy from the weapon. "The weapon chose you," she explained, her voice filled with wonder. "It recognized your courage, your willingness to protect others, even at the cost of yourself. That act of selflessness must have altered its effect." Ethan looked down at his hands, flexing them experimentally. "So, I'm okay. We're okay." "For now," she replied cautiously, "but the enforcers will come again. They won't stop until they've fulfilled their mission." Ethan nodded grimly, determination replacing his earlier fear. "Then we'll be ready. Together." Her expression softened, gratitude shining in her luminous eyes. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything." Over the following days, the sanctuary became a place of healing, not just for the land, but for both of them. The alien woman shared more about her people, their fears, and their mistakes. In turn, Ethan spoke of humanity's struggles, its capacity for both destruction and redemption. Together, they forged a fragile hope, a belief that understanding could bridge the gap between their species. When the time came to leave, the alien woman guided Ethan to a new ship, one capable of returning him to Earth. As they stood on the threshold, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "Remember this," she said firmly. "Your kind is flawed, yes, but also extraordinary. Don't let anyone take that away from you." Ethan smiled, his resolve unshakable. "I won't. And neither should you." As the ship ascended into the stars, Ethan knew their journey wasn't over. The galaxy remained vast and dangerous, but for the first time, he felt a spark of optimism. Humanity's future wasn't set in stone, and neither was the fate of the cosmos. Somewhere among the stars, two unlikely allies had proven that even in the darkest times, hope could shine brightest.